First of all, a very good afternoon to all three of you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us here on the stage today. My name is Abhishek and I represent Salesforce.com. We are a 25-year-old organization and we have recently started our public sector practice. Glad to be here sharing the stage with all of you. I believe I've been given the opportunity to moderate the session. I have a few questions that I would be posing to all of you. Trust me, these are not very difficult questions for all three of you. Let me start by you, sir. I believe there's a lot of conversation being done around big data analytics. We understand that in the world of technology, a lot of data got generated in the last 5 years through the advancement that we have seen in the world of technology. How do you believe that organizations, PSUs, government organizations can really leverage analytics to provide real-time insights and also do decision making on evidence-based, fact-based analysis of the data? You have a
Thank you. And before I answer that, I believe that we are the session between everybody and their lunch. So I'll try and be very brief. You asked a very topical question and I would give a very crisp answer to that. Big data is the new gold. And all our decision making now, our resource mapping has become optimal because you started leveraging big data and started using AI. I'll give you a case study or rather an example. We have a Chief Minister's dashboard which is used for almost all policy planning, policy curation, policy rectification, policy management, etc. We have started feeding direct real-time data into the system. We have started leveraging this data using AI, and believe me, our policy formation has taken a quantum leap as far as its effectiveness is concerned because of the big data that we have started using.
Understood.
I'll give another example. Sorry. We implemented the health management information system in the state. What this did is it started generating patient-based data in huge numbers for the state to understand, study, and utilize. We have been able to plan our health resources. We have been able to plan which particular health track to feed more resources vis-a-vis the other using the big data that we have started generating. So yes, this data is important, it is critical, and it is, as I said, the new gold.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you for that insight, sir.
Pleasure.
My next question is to Dr. Arun. Well, it's a kind of related question, but mostly on the methodologies and technologies that one would use. How do you believe that integrating these large data sets that have been generated from different sources could be effective in decision making as a process for public sector in general?
As far as decision making is concerned, let me explain it with few examples. I am from an educational institute we are expert in data analytics in the area of artificial intelligence. So we signed an MOU with an institute called NIPER. Basically they are in the area of drug designing. They approached us how we can use this data analytics for customized drug design. And let me give you the example of customized drugs. Just remember this COVID period. In that period, one medicine was very popular, that is Dolo 650. अब किसी को फीवर 99 था तब भी उसको डोलो दे दी, किसी का 104 था तब भी उसको डोलो दे दी. तो देयर वाज नो मैकेनिज्म कि किसको कितनी पोटेंसी देनी है डोलो की. तो वी आर वर्किंग ऑन ए टूल, on a technique कि how we can design the drug as per the symptoms. not the generalized drug, it's customized drug. Similarly, see the another application in the area of education. Now in India, National Education Policy 2020 in place, where the focus is on multidisciplinary education. And you know, you can rephrase the entire NEP 2020. It's just like design your own degree. If a BTech student wants to pursue, along with computer science, for example, music, he or she can join a institute which is, you know, known for music education. But you know, our population is too large, youth population is again too large. How to make a model which will be applicable for each and every youth? So the use of data analytics in this particular domain, the use of artificial intelligence in this particular space. So we are developing a model by using the data analytics. We are using the artificial intelligence technique, how a student can design his own degree.
Interesting. Yeah.
Depending upon his expertise or ambition or interest. And the third example, you know, this session se pehle there was discussion and there was, you know, the speakers were talking about the Kumbh Mela. Recently we signed an MOU with National Oceanography Lab, which is at UK. They approached us, they have huge data set and they don't know how to process it and how to generate the meaningful information out of this data. And our team processed the entire data and we submitted the final findings out of that data. And they were very much impressed. And they approached us, can we replicate the same model in case of Kumbh Mela in India? Because if we can process a large data which is related with ocean, can we apply the same model at the time of Kumbh Snan? So there are n number of examples, n numbers of tools, techniques where big data is very useful and it will help the society, it will help the decision makers. And the fourth example, recently we signed an MOU with Lucknow based university. The name of the university is Bhatkande Sanskriti University. And they are expert in, you know, the classical music and classical dance. One day I was sitting with the Honorable Governor of UP and she told me that we started a new university in Lucknow which is related with Indian music and Indian dance. So when we can collaborate with them and we can apply artificial intelligence tools to promote Indian classical music and classical dance. So, you know, the application of big data, the application of artificial intelligence, name the field we can apply in that particular field to find out the meaningful information. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that insight, sir. My next question is to you, sir. And you know, since we are talking about digital transformation, it's perhaps asking for your insights onto public-private partnership, right? We all believe that digital transformation is not a destination, it's an exercise that goes on for a very long time. So how do you believe the partnership between public and private enterprises could help accelerate that journey?
Thank you. Thank you. Very good question, actually. You see, the past speakers that we heard through the day, they all have talked of the kind of laurels that we have attained in the digital public infrastructure, the kind of examples we have set for the world. The world is emulating what we are doing. We are no longer, you know, following the global best practices. We are creating global best practices. How all this has happened? It has happened all through the governance and the enabling framework provided by the government and the enterprise and the industry taking it forward. And the academia joining hands to create in-house IPs, domestic IPs. To give you an example, we at ESDS have partnered with the Software Technology Parks of India. So 2 of our data centers are in collaboration with STPI. It's a PPP model. So the STPI does what STPI does. They are very good at promoting IT. They are the harbingers for creating making India a software giant what we are today. We joined hands with them for providing cloud and data center services. We knew this for decades, and that partnership has been so successful. These two data centers have, got filled in no time, and major initiatives of the government are being, supported from there. So the limitations and the challenges of the government, the policy-driven challenges, the procurement cycles, there are challenges within the governments which the government understands. Like I was talking to General Kandar in the morning. He was saying that the procurement cycle is so long, whereas the technology is moving so fast that the two can't keep pace. Mm-hmm. So you can't do anything about the march of technology, but what you can do is, shrink, compress the procurement cycles. That too also has its own limitations in the governance framework. But when the private and the public, they come together, they join hands. We, combine each other's strengths, overcome each other's shortcomings, and make things happen on a very faster time frame. And that's very important in a lot of other domains. Like I will give an example of cybersecurity. So a lot of people talked about cybersecurity. We have a very large practice of, running SOC as a service. So when we're doing this for various government organizations, we realize that there is a definite need of, monitoring things that are happening on the dark web. Government, because of its own various limitations, cannot venture there. But yes, when we join hands together, the private enterprise can go in there, we can monitor the dark web, we can get the insights and the actionables before they actually begin to play. So today, cybersecurity is no more reactive, it's proactive.
Absolutely.
Unless you are able to find and, act in time, you cannot curb it. To do that, this kind of partnership across the infrastructure spectrum of the digital landscape and also the services has to be in place.
Let me ask you another question which is related to this question. In what ways do you believe this partnership between public and private enterprise could also affect certain policy-making guidelines that government agencies have?
Yes, very, very interesting, because we see this day in and out as part of the industry. When I will take very specific examples of the government. When we participate in an RFP, invariably the RFPs are drafted and created. Lot of interaction happens, a lot of inputs are taken from the industry. There are frameworks, there are policies which the government has put in place. I will take specific examples of the MeitY guidelines. So there are MeitY model, MeitY has put up a lot of RFPs on model RFP on the website. There are guidelines for the government community cloud. There are guidelines for the virtual private cloud. So the thought process, if you see the thought process by which all these policies have been created, the insights have invariably come from the industry, but to keep pace with the changing dynamics, to keep pace with the way the technology is evolving, the business landscape is evolving, whatever was put in about 5, 6, 7 years ago may not be relevant today. Absolutely. Those policies may not be relevant today. It's the industry which comes forward and tells them that, like, very pertinent example now for us, particularly for India, given the scenario, the geopolitical shocks that we are seeing. People were talking in the morning also about the changing geopolitical environment, wherein what we saw what happened with Russia in the Russia-Ukraine war. The entire thing was shut down. The nation was at war, emergency, and they didn't have the services when they needed it the most. So to guard from them, we need to put in place the safeguards so that the country is protected from these shocks. We have the capabilities now within in-house. We have the technical know-hows. We need to put in those policies in place so that the digital infrastructure that we have created is secure.
Thank you so much. Continuing on the same topic, I have my other question to you, sir. I guess when we talk about digital transformation, in the process of digital transformation, we see a lot of innovation being built in as well. And many times we see these innovations are driven by some of the startups that we see in the country. What are your thoughts on encouraging these startups to become part of this digital transformation by the public enterprises?
I'm happy to be here in this dais. For example, I think I'm happy that I'm sharing a stage with Dr. Sherry, who is also a partner in crime, I believe. And sir, you forgot to mention our MOU, which we have for CRO. So I actually was waiting that he will talk about it, but he didn't talk about it. So thankfully I'll have 2 more minutes of my speech. So what I think is, I think taking from my previous speaker, I call it a GIA model, where government, industry and academia should be a part of everything. I will also explain why we need this model. I think when we talk about PPP, I think it's kind of outdated. For example, I'll tell you why and also put it forward. When we started looking at the climate tech, that's what I call now. So when we started doing climate tech, for example, we wanted to know how lightning is striking, what is the kind of technology which we need to inform people on lightning strikes. So we wanted to bring through a lot of emerging technologies. And we called for an expression of interest to do the emerging technology, because you will never know what kind of technology is available with you. That is the first challenge. If you are not aware of what is available, you need to go through an EOI route. Then you come for the RFP route. That's what we did. And then we started collecting all the information. I think all the smaller experiments which has happened all across the country. For example, there was something happening in Andhra Pradesh, there was something happening in Karnataka. So we were able to, even in Kerala, so we were able to chalk out all this thing, and then we realized, okay, we have to build up a stack or a data lake for our climate data to be worked upon. And I also strongly believe that if you need such strong infrastructure, it's not just the industry, it's also the academia should be a part of it. So that's why we have the country's first climate resilient observatory in IIIT Lucknow. The reason I'll also explain why academia is important for it, because you have a pool of knowledge experts who would accredit. I think that's more important. When you look at technology, he was talking about 5 years down the line the technology be outdated. For an industry person, it might be an outdated technology, but for an government, it could be enough. I could survive with that kind of technology, and I need not have to invest more. So what we look at is, it's not just proof of concept. I think whether your technology is solving a problem or not. What I look at is proof of value. What is that your technology is trying to bring to what we are doing? Am I investing 100 crores to get a value of only 10 crores in my entire business operations? So that is what we look at. So what we did is we have established this climate resilient. In fact, it is doing pretty well. It is doing really well that we were able to stop any flash flood deaths so far. I think if you look at the last 20 days or 21 days of flood management in UP, we were able to stop flash floods because we have data, and we were able to cull this data and send it to the, our outpost, which is as far as Kushinagar, a smaller village in Kushinagar. And then we were able to do this. So that is the beauty of setting up this climate resilient observatory. To your question, you spoke about startups. I always believe that the most important part in the entire digital landscape is the startups. They are the one who will bring, the newer technology. I think newer ways of doing same stuff. Maybe you have a monolith, and you have to create that, break that monolith into a beautiful, multiple microservices. I think if you're looking at microservices, so you look at, I have been a MeSeva director for about one year in Andhra Pradesh. It's a huge monolith. And now we are moving towards a lot of microservices. So how can you, bring efficiency in your microservices? You have a monolith on a, legacy server system. How can you, export to a cloud system? How can your cloud be efficient? So you look at a lot of startups coming and fine-tuning what the bigger technology is doing, and then we are able to give more value to what we are doing. I think startup is integral part of it. I think we are also talking to IIIT Lucknow to have a 100 startup demonstration. I think that's more important. The point is, it's easy to get technology, cheaper technology. I think if you encourage startups, we would get better technologies also, and technology at cost. I think I should not call it cheaper technology, but I should call it technology at cost. So that would mean that that we were able to get best of what is available, and we also grow an innovative ecosystem. And that's something which we have to look at. We are not just a technology player, but we should also create technology for ourselves. That's more important.
Thank you so much for those inputs. I guess we're running out of time, so I have a last question, and I'll ask any one of you to pick it up. You see, when you talk about digital transformation, when you talk about data, governance, a lot of discussions around data privacy. right? In the recent times, we have seen a lot of policies being formulated around citizens' data or the data which is getting generated within the country. I would invite views from any of you on, how do you think public sector organizations can really leverage policies being framed around data privacy, data security to help acceleration in the digital space?
I just want to draw the attention to 3 points. Thus, see, we are progressively moving to cloud. So, gone are the days of on-prem infrastructure. So, when we are moving to cloud, you would be surprised to know that the umpteen number, there are cloud service providers which are using American IP addresses. They are using American encryption. You are not sure whether your data is actually there. So this is the era, this is the environment in which we are living. Unless we do something about this particular aspect, there is no point, people emphasize on the data being housed in data centers in India. Fine, you are there. But if the IP address is turned off from there or the encryption is turned off, these servers are not good as bricks. So these are the 3 points that we need to address.
Thank you. Any other points from?
On behalf of all governments and on behalf of my colleague Naveenji as well, I assure you, we are all very cognizant of the fact that data privacy is critical. MeitY has come up with very stringent guidelines with very heavy fines. So be rest assured, all of us are aware of our responsibilities, that we hold citizen data in a vicarious capacity, and we'll be up to the task. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Unless any of the other gentlemen have any views on this point, I would like to thank you, all of you, for sharing the stage with us. Thank you for all the insights that you shared for the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. I would like to request Mr. Sanjeev Joshi, IPS Director General and Chairman and MD, Housing Construction, Government of Kerala. I request you, sir, to please kindly come and join us on stage to felicitate all the dignitaries. Thank you. So first of all, I would like to request our moderator, Mr. Abhishek Rai, sir, please come forward and join us. Thank you so much. Next, I request JS Naveen Kumar, sir, please come forward and join us. Everyone, thodi si taaliyan, everybody all together. Thank you. I request Mr. Anirudh Saran Singh, sir, please come forward. Thank you. I request Dr. Arun Mohan Sherry, sir. Thank you. I request Colonel Deepak Anand, CEO, Public Service. Please, sir, come and join us. Everyone, एक बार जोरदार तालियां once again, everybody, for our dignitaries. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. I request all of you to please kindly come and join us for the group photograph.